Hello, Education 523, Dr. Allen here. Hope you are surviving the snow. Hope you're surviving the cold weather. I'm recording this on Friday, the 21st, looking at my calendar, and it is freezing outside, but that's okay. It's January. With all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and dive right into what we're going to do. By the way, I'm in the midst of grading everything that's kind of popping up. Just in case you need any feedback or need to talk to me, remember, even though we're asynchronous, you are always welcome to contact me at any time, set up appointments, anything like that. Most of you have been good emailing me if there's anything. One thing, I still sometimes have some bright space growing pains. So if it looks like something isn't open or you can't access it, just make sure you fire me an email. It's probably something on my end. I'm in the middle of grading things. Apologies. I try to stay on top of everything as fast as I can or get a pretty quick turnaround. I'm going to be doing some things this weekend. But I'm in the midst of doing a presentation and all. That's my problem, not yours, obviously. But just wanted to let you know I have not forgotten, I'll get on the grading. So with all that being said, I think most of the stuff should be starting to trickle in. But anyway, I'm going to pull up the syllabus, just a reminder, just look where we are. Just in case you need anything, this week it's amazing, man. Weeks just fly by. We're going to talk about the Zen exercise this week. It's pretty simple, I think. Everyone should have no problems with that. Discussion 2 and Lowen chapters 5 and 6. So without further ado, oh, by the way, if you need it for the action plan, that should be posted up under assignments with the detailed description. I think I sent that out, but if I did not, I will make sure to do it this week just so you can look at it. You should have access to it over here and under assignments and action plan. Look, some people have already worked on this. I just saw that. Let me go over. The details of it are posted. Should be anyway. Yep, there it is. Just in case you ever need it, it's up, the rubric and everything. I think I showed that last week, but just in case you need it, it is there. And if you can't access it, just again, fire me an email. With that, with no further ado, let me go back. Content. I'm going to try as usual. Oh, by the way, the Ed puzzles. That was one thing I knew I was stalling for a reason. A couple of people did email me about the Ed puzzles. Don't worry. Actually, everyone did a great job on them. I'll make sure that the grades get posted up. If there's open-ended questions on an Ed puzzle, I have to go in and grade it. And so if it gives you a score where if there's like 10 questions and 6 are open-ended, it'll give you like a 4 out of 10. The only reason it gives you a 4 out of 10 is because I have to go in and score the other one. It doesn't mean that you got a 40 or anything like that. So I did not mean to give everyone a heart attack. And I should have mentioned that last week when I recorded. It wasn't something that popped in my head. And I think 2 people emailed me. Apologies. It's not, I just have to go in and do the open-ended questions, which I'm probably going to be doing this weekend, maybe even this evening. So, all righty, I'll come back to the assignments. I want to just talk a little bit about the readings and just kind of make a few points on everything, and then we'll kind of go from there. Oh, by the way, I mentioned last week something about a podcast on Wounded Knee. I put it down there if you're interested. And some of this on here relates to the content we're talking about. They're optional readings if you're interested. Let me see. I'm going to click this. Again, these are just kind of my notes, and I'm just going to pull them up. But some things that Lowen talked about were ethnocentrism. Basically, the belief that one's culture, race, culture, ethnic group is superior to all others. Also, this kind of ties into the ideas that, American is exceptional. And it's the belief that America is better than other nations. Obviously, I don't think everyone always believes that, but that's kind of a theme that Lowen sees in the way we approach all education across all content areas. A lot of times there's a focus on that, I think. The easiest one I can always think about, again, forgive me, I default to social studies a lot. If you have 2 textbooks, I don't think I have any here, down there. I think they're all at home. Sorry, I was looking at my office down below. If you ever look at an American history textbook, a lot of times they're very patriotic. They might have the flag and the eagle and Uncle Sam or something like that. It's that exceptionalism. And that's something that he gets into a little bit, how we approach content. Of course, he gets into a lot with Native Americans, and that's actually going to be the focus of some things that I just wanted to talk about this week. This about pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving is something that he gets into. And that's something I've even talked about with other students before. That's a tricky subject sometimes. And I do like some ways that Lowen talks about how to present it. And by the way, there's things that I agree with Lowen on how he talks about, and there's some things I don't. And when I mean I don't agree with him, I mean the practicality in a classroom and if you can do it. For example, I don't know how some of these are pretty heavy topics and how deep you want to get into it with a first, second, or third grade classroom, as opposed to maybe getting into this topic about Thanksgiving with a high school classroom. It's going to be a totally different experience. But one thing that he does mention, I think you can get into, you can talk about Squanto a good bit. You can talk about his, how he was abducted from his tribe, traveled to Europe, very brilliant guy, learns languages, can translate. He escaped back to what is today the United States or the Americas. You can get into that and kind of blend in that American or that Native American lesson into it, not just about, pilgrims and, Thanksgiving and turkey and things like that. Synchronism, that's the blending of elements of two or more cultures to create something new. And that's what he's talking about there a little bit with Squanto. But history textbooks usually present Native Americans and white Europeans as living two different ways. That's not really how it functions. Just think about, I'm actually listening to something the other day where they talked about this. If you think about large communities throughout history, there's always a blending of cultures. Today, it's the case. It was the same way 100 years ago. It was the same way 200 years ago, and back and back. So it's that idea that, when we live in there, we don't usually, when there's people together, we don't live in silos. We interact with one another. And that's something I think he's starting to talk about a little more with trying to think about with your lessons and broadening them out. I just threw this in there because Columbus, I know I mentioned him last week, but they kind of get in there. He showed the maps a little bit in these chapters, and that might even have been a little bit earlier, about some places that discovered America or the first people to come to America. Don't forget that it's not just Columbus isn't first, and I think most of you probably know this, but there are legends that Irish monks actually arrived here in the 6th century and the 500s. The most famous one I would say is probably the Vikings. The Vikings actually got here in what is the 10th, well, the year basically 1000, that'd be 11th century more. I think some people think they got here in the 900s, give or take, but you get the point. Leif Erikson, Newfoundland, things like that, Newfoundland up in Canada. Actually, that settlement was just in the news because I think they just found some other like relics and such from an archaeological dig. Also the Chinese, a lot of people think they got here in the 1400s before Columbus. There was a very famous book, I think 1421, the year the Chinese discovered America. That's something I think you can think about, whether in elementary school, social studies, or just talking to your classes in general. Sometimes we look at America, well, I'm doing a motion here. Sometimes we look at America like this way, east going west. I think that's the natural way to do it. I think we do it when we talk and discuss, there's a whole history out in the West and going this way. And I think that's something he was getting into with Native Americans. You can look at these things, you can talk about the things that Native Americans did, scientific achievement, social achievements, all that. And the reason I bring all of this up and why I do like the Lowen readings is I think a lot of times when we teach Native American history, sometimes I don't want it is overlooked, I think, in American history a lot of times. And it's also overlooked in when we just do basic discussions in classrooms and the achievements of specific individuals. It's something that, and a lot of times when we teach this, it's a lot of, I'm going to say this, I'm a little tongue tied and I want to make sure I say this the right way. I think a lot of times the way that we do it is not, it focuses on negative type things. It took me a while to spit that out, but think about it. It's like the Trail of Tears. I put Wounded Knee up there. These are things that they're important events and they're tragic events, but there's much more to Native American culture than just the negative. There's things, there's achievements, there's societal things, there's math that they did, there's science achievements that they did, there's social ways that they interact. And that's something that I think, you just got to think about if you're trying to bring something different into your class. Maybe you can incorporate some of this. Also, I think sometimes, the way this class is, diversity awareness, when we're, I am a longtime Washington football team fan. And of course, I'll go ahead and just say, the most common name was, if they were the Redskins for 50, 60 years. That's something that, is slowly changing. It's still a lot of people are against it. I think the new name comes out, on February 2nd. But it's one of those things you have to recognize. I've heard some people say, if it offends just one or two people, is it worth having? There's a lot of debate about that. I would say at this point it was probably time for it to go, but that's just me. But that's the most famous example. There are high schools, some of you may teach at high schools that use these names, and it's still a hot button topic. And one thing I kind of pulled up, I don't know if you've ever looked at 538.com. It does a lot of election stuff, but it does a lot of polling. And hopefully it'll pull up for me here. But I did post an article on Brightspace. It's there, and I have it in the link. But it talks about hundreds of schools that still use Native American teams as mascots. And if you look here, I'm not going to read the whole article. You can. These are the most common names that are still used in high schools as mascots that are relate back to Native Americans. And as you can see, Redskins is still commonly used. 45 schools use it. Braves is very common. Actually, the Braves were in the news. Again, this isn't really directly related to schools, but the Atlanta Braves, when they won the World Series, they do the chop. Actually, this weekend, I think the Kansas City Chiefs play. They do a tomahawk chop, and I think a lot of people think it's time for that to go. Warriors, I know we have a local school in one of the neighboring counties of Berkeley County, actually still uses Warriors, I believe. There's Chiefs, Indians, very common. So it is a topic where, these names, they do, a lot of Native American cultures aren't big fans of them. They're still commonly used. I think it's one of those things where I think, especially in West Virginia, because I still do see these names used, just stuff you're probably going to hear about, and you really do need to, I think, probably research and kind of get an opinion on it and discuss. Like I say, I think sometimes, I'm not saying that there's ill intent. Sometimes when these are selected, just times change. And I guess that's kind of where I'm going to go with that. But again, you can check all this out, and there's a lot on there. And actually, I thought I had it on here. Oh, look, I clicked it too fast. If you look, if you want to break it down, here are some states that actually, if they have a blue, they've actually banned the use of Native American mascots in their states. Wisconsin's had some back and forth. I'm going to assume most people here are in West Virginia, Maryland, or Virginia. And as you can see, we do not have anything as of this date. I'm sorry, when this article was written, which I think was last year. Let's look. Oh, 2020. So there you go. It was when the Redskins became the Washington football team. So anyway, you're welcome to check this out. It's actually a pretty interesting article, but it is something I think you can definitely keep in mind on. And I will say this, if you do any type of language arts class and you do any type of discussion, persuasive writing, debates. I used to do these in my class. I had a persuasive writing class or persuasive writing assignment and a debate about whether these names are appropriate. I don't even know. I would check with my school at this point. This was probably about 6-7 years ago. But it was, I think it was an eye opener for a lot of students who thought they might have been on one side, and after they got done, they kind of went to the other. So anywho, there's that. Let me jump back here a little bit. And we'll go to content. And I thought, whoops, I had something else for you all to see. Is this that's the chop? I'm not going to do that. Sorry, I had a little short news article I wanted to show you on the names that I thought was pretty good. Maybe I put it on here. I hope I put it on here. Up there it is, I think. It was actually, it's from Chicago, and I don't know if anyone knows this. Again, it's a professional team, but so many students, professional sports have such an influence on our culture. I watch sports all the time. The Chicago Blackhawks are a team that still play, and a lot of those laws that I was showing, I was probably not very clear in what I was saying. They banned the use of the names. Some of those states have actually banned the wearing of the uniforms or the logos too. Like Washington Redskins is not allowed in some of those states to be worn. I think California is one. No Washington Redskins apparel is allowed to be worn. So it's just something you can, keep in mind with it, with the schools. But, oh, there it is, Washington football ban in California schools. Didn't even see it listed there. So Let's go ahead and hit this. I'm going to go ahead and play this video and just let you see it. It's posted if you are interested.
Of team mascots across the country, and some of the most common include Native American imagery. In the latest edition of our Race in Chicago series, Mike Berman takes a closer look at the impact this has on Native American communities.
Sitting inside her office at Northwestern Center for Native American and Indigenous Research, Pam Silas still vividly remembers the moment. It was the fall of 1997, and she and her teenage daughter were on a tour at Lane Tech. The high school symbol at that time, the Indians.
The young girls on the basketball team laid down on the Indian head logo of Lane Tech and started whooping, like, like, oh my gosh. My daughter looked at me, I looked at her, and I was like, oh my goodness.
As a member of the Menominee tribe and a descendant of the United Nations, the experience was stunning, but not surprising. Going back more than 100 years, schools and sports teams used Native American mascots, logos, symbols, images, and chants. For many fans, they represent tradition. For many Native people, they represent racism.
I think based on what's happened in this country in the past year, that anyone who doesn't get it, really, I have no patience for. It needs to be stopped.
Lane Tech retired the Indians' name and symbol last summer. Others across the state have stopped using Native American mascots as well. Most notably, the University of Illinois, which in 2007 put an end to Chief Illiniwek performances and imagery. Nationally, the Washington football team cut ties with the Redskins' name and logo last summer. And when the coming baseball season ends, so too will Cleveland's use of Indians. Its well-known Chief Wahoo logo has already been retired. Still, approximately 2,000 Native American mascots, including the Blackhawks, persist across the United States. Dr. Stephanie Freiberg has researched this issue for 25 years, and her findings are clear.
Being used as a mascot lowers self-esteem, it increases depression, suicide ideation, and lowers achievement-related future goals and beliefs that one can positively impact their tribal community.
Dr. Freiberg, who's a member of the Tulalip tribes of Washington State, says these feelings disproportionately affect young Native people, partly because Native American mascots create a feeling of invisibility.
They essentially make us something that we're not, which are contemporary people with families who are working hard in our daily lives to give our children the best opportunity.
Chicago alone has almost 22,000 Native American residents, according to a 2019 study published by UIC. At the city's American Indian Center, Fawn Pochel, who's OG Cree First Nations, is the education coordinator.
I don't think people expect Native people to be living in Chicago, even though Chicago is an Indigenous word.
Illinois' Native community has a major ally in State Representative Maurice West, who represents the 67th District in Rockford. Near Rockford is Hananega High School. A few years ago, the students protested the school's Indian mascot, and it got the Democrat thinking. Early last year, he introduced a bill that would prohibit state schools from using Native American mascots or imagery unless certain criteria are met.
This is a human, like Native American community are the only humans that we use really as mascots. That should say something right then and there.
Since 2005, the American Psychological Association has recommended the immediate retirement of all Native American mascots, symbols, images, and personalities. But the Blackhawks still have no plans to make a change. The team declined to make an on-camera comment, but directed me to its website. That's where it's giving updates about the Native American initiatives it's committed to carrying out now and in the future, something the team is doing with the guidance of Native partners. But for experts, if there's no change, it's not enough.
The team not willing to change or even take a step back is them protecting their profits.
We have to stand up and say, we can't tolerate that. Please change it. Please change that mascot.
Mike Berman, NBC5 Sports.
Important story. Our thanks to Mike.
So there you go. That's a video, and this is posted, but I think it kind of gets to the heart of it where, when you think about it, and around here, I think even, I'm in Shepherdstown. I think most of you are in the area. I don't know if we think we sometimes have a huge Native American population, but it is something that affects a lot of people. So again, just food for thought and how you approach things and diversity and discussions and things you can bring in there related to Native Americans. Again, Lowen has some ideas when you read the textbook. all this is up there. And actually, let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything. And there's an article on who's coming first, but I won't talk about that right now. Alrighty, I always say I try to keep these as timely as I possibly can, but I do want to make a few points. One, there is a discussion board, as you can see. This week you have two things that are due: the Zen scavenger hunt and discussion number 2. There's the discussion right there. Again, just in case you don't, if you never have access to that, excuse me, make sure you just kind of fire me an email. I may have not given you the view. There's a little eyeball I have to click. I try to remember to do it each week too. But basically the topic kind of gets in there. Well, I'm just going to read it. As you see, Lowen defines synchronicity as taking 2 elements from 2 or more cultures to form something new. He says it's how cultures typically change and survive. Have you heard of the term? If not, no big deal. I hadn't heard of it until I read Lowen many years ago. My learning it helped decrease Americans' ethnocentrism or American exceptionalism, so to speak. When Lowen speaks to Native Americans, he emphasizes, ways that Native American youth can avoid having to choose between Western and Indian culture. And again, getting back into that blending. Do you think choosing both is possible at this point? So again, it's just an opinion question. They're your opinions. I'm not here to, judge too much, but at least definitely consider, the thought, think about some of the stuff that's posted on here and the links and such. So babbling a little bit. And there's some extra stuff on here if you want to check it out. There's the 538, I'm sorry. There's a New York Times article on names if you want to check it out. There you go. Articles have to go. I have a feeling you're going to probably see some stuff this weekend on the Chiefs. I know with Washington football team, the Chiefs have started to have a little bit of pressure put on them related to some things. Go back in here. And University of Illinois, I do want to make this point. If you notice when you watch that, one of the things when they stopped doing that in 2007, a lot of that was rooted because if you notice, it was a white guy running around. I don't know how else to say it as a Native American hooping and hollering. That's what the news article was talking about. And the optics were starting to look very questionable, I guess is a nice way to put it. And the World Series actually was just in the news related to this with the tomahawk chop. So anyway, there's some stuff on there if you're interested. This week, besides the discussion post that you have to do this Zen project. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn actually was someone who kind of talked about that people's history. I mentioned it on our openings, our video. People's history versus basically hero history and looking at the common man. He has, even though he has passed on, he has an education site and they keep it. You can sign up for newsletters and things. I get stuff daily from this. And they have a ton of teaching materials on different things. What I would like you to do is go in, maybe check out some of this. There's stuff on different periods, as you can see here, all US history. I don't care what you pick. And by the way, not all the lessons are social studies style lessons. They're just topics that you can pull stuff from. And then there's a whole bunch you see economics, if you want to do some math. I was trying to think on there, LGBTQ stuff, if you're interested. I know that's always currently very timely. There was some stuff in the news actually related to the NCAA that passed yesterday. Of course, racial type things, Pacific Islanders, anything. I'm not going to be picky. Women's rights, whatever type of history or content that you're looking to kind of look at, you're going to go through. And once you kind of check the site out a little bit, there is a template on here. Let's see if I can get that up. And it is right here. And all you're going to do is pick the theme. What's the resource that's on there? And did you like the resource? So for example, let me go back. Let me go back. I'm going to click this. And if you click all this, I read a lot on the Cold War, so I'm going to pick that. And let's pick something on the environment. And let's see what the resource, there's a film. So I'll go there and let's check it out. There it is. And you can click that. And you can just talk about what it was. Was it a book? Was it a film? Was it an actual lesson plan? What did you think of it? That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. You have to do though. I should make this point. I don't know if it's actually said on there. I've been faster to just go back to Blackboard. Let's go. Here, wait, right space. It's Friday. You go here, you got to pick 20, which I think for a graduate class isn't asking too much. You just put it on there and just submit the document as, you can do it as a Word or save it as a PDF and submit it. So that should do it. Sorry, I got a little long-winded. Hopefully you were able to get something out. But again, Native American aspects, think about it, one, in terms of your content. Also think about it socially and how you're approaching things, even if it's as simple as, or seems as simple as a school name. It may seem simple to us, but it may have much deeper meaning and connections to other people. So with all that being said, I'm going to close out and tell everyone stay warm, and Susan stops the share, and have a fantastic weekend.